A warning that unfolded not over weeks of careful negotiation, but in 72 hours. 72 hours that shifted the calculus in the Middle East. 72 hours that forced the Trump administration into emergency consultations. 72 hours that placed Israel's defense establishment on heightened alert status. What Iranian President Pezeshkian did this week crossed a line that Washington had hoped would hold. And when that line broke, Israel did not hesitate. They responded with precision, overwhelming force, and strategic clarity. For 3 months now, there had been signals, not official government statements, not formal diplomatic channels, just signals, that Tehran was preparing something unprecedented. Iran has been aggressive, yes, but they have been calculated in their aggression. Their moves have followed a certain rhythm, a cadence, almost a predictability. But what set off alarm bells in Washington and Tel Aviv this Tuesday was that the rhythm went silent. Intelligence analysts who monitor Iranian military communications know the indicators. The spike in encrypted traffic between IRGC commanders, the movement of missile components toward Western deployment sites, the repositioning of proxy forces along the Syrian-Israeli border, the sudden cessation of routine propaganda broadcasts, all of that went quiet. And whenever Tehran goes quiet, it means something is about to get loud. Early Thursday morning, U.S. Central Command detected what they described as coordinated missile system activations, including Iranian Fateh 110 short-range ballistic missiles that had not been brought to launch readiness in over 14 months. These are the kinds of assets that Iran only deploys when they are signaling something very specific. Imminent retaliation, preparation for regional escalation, or direct confrontation with Israeli forces. Western intelligence observers didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all three at once. But what they did know was that Iran was changing its strategic posture, and when nuclear threshold nations shift strategic posture without explanation, even by incremental measures, Washington pays attention. The warning issued by President Pezeshkian Thursday night was not normal. It was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was urgent. Senior Iranian officials, after emergency National Security Council meetings, described Israel's recent operations as violations of Iranian sovereignty, acts of war against the Islamic Republic, and perhaps most importantly, provocations that would trigger responses beyond Israel's capacity to absorb. But intimidation only works if the target hesitates. Israel did not. In fact, their response Friday was among the most decisive military actions we've seen in the current escalation cycle. Here's what we know. Within 6 hours of Pezeshkian's televised address, Israeli Defense Forces launched preemptive strikes across 3 countries. These weren't the routine counterterrorism operations. These were large-scale strategic strikes, precision munitions, and electronic warfare systems that Israel only deploys when they are preparing to dismantle enemy capabilities before they become operational threats. Friday night, Pentagon sources confirmed that Israeli Air Force F-35I stealth fighters launched coordinated strikes on weapons depots in Syria, including Iranian Revolutionary Guard facilities that had recently been hardened with advanced air defense systems for what analysts believe was protection of high-value missile stockpiles. Israel struck before Iran could disperse those weapons. They hit the Masyaf Military Research Center. They hit ammunition depots near Tartus. They hit command bunkers south of Damascus that were likely preparing to coordinate retaliatory operations. In other words, Israel targeted Iran's escalation infrastructure, the logistics network that would have made any major assault operational. This is what made Pezeshkian's warning so urgent. Iran's military repositioning wasn't just symbolic. It was actionable. It represented the kind of preparation that could trigger regional conflict if left unchecked. And Israel, understanding that fully, responded with force. Not recklessly, not impulsively, but strategically. They didn't target civilian infrastructure. They didn't expand operations into Iranian territory. They hit weapons systems. They hit command networks. And here's where the story becomes even more critical. Western intelligence agencies now believe that Pezeshkian's latest warning was designed to test the resolve of Trump's incoming administration after months of transition uncertainty. Iran wanted to see whether Washington would restrain Israel, but instead the opposite happened. The Trump transition team didn't pressure Jerusalem to stand down. They issued statements of support that were so unequivocal, so aligned with Israeli strategic interests, that even Tehran's hardliners noticed. You don't get Iran's Supreme National Security Council's attention easily, but today both Washington and Tel Aviv did. Middle East security analysts speaking with intelligence community contacts under anonymity described Pezeshkian's shift as escalation probing, a way to establish red lines before Trump officially takes office. But Israel proved today that they remain both independent and lethal. Their airstrikes were not only surgically precise, they were timed so strategically that they degraded Iranian proxy capabilities hours before a rumored coordination meeting. That timing matters because it shows Israel has penetrated Iran's operational security. It shows that Israel is not waiting for threats to materialize. They are eliminating them at the assembly stage. As reports continued coming in throughout the evening, we learned more about the scale of Israel's response. Israeli naval commandos carried out sabotage operations on weapons shipments moving through Lebanese ports, forcing Hezbollah to cancel planned military exercises. The Israeli Air Force targeted Hezbollah ammunition facilities in the Bekaa Valley that had been resupplied in the last 96 hours. Israeli intelligence units operating across the Syrian border reportedly disrupted communications infrastructure used by Iranian advisors to coordinate Shia militia movements. This wasn't just tactical harassment. This wasn't just message sending. This was operational dismantlement. This was capability degradation. And capability degradation is the one thing Iran has struggled to prevent since Israeli strikes intensified in October. For every weapons system they have smuggled into Syria and Lebanon, Israel has countered with intelligence-driven strikes that destroy those systems before deployment. Remember, Tehran thought Trump's second term would bring strategic confusion. They thought Washington's attention would turn inward. They thought Israel would operate with less freedom. But tonight, the exact opposite is happening. Trump's team is coordinating closely with Jerusalem. Washington is providing real-time intelligence support. Israel is operating with expanded latitude and advanced munitions. What makes this moment so dangerous and so volatile is that Pezeshkian's latest warning happened at a time when he is under enormous domestic pressure. Iranian hardliners want immediate military retaliation against Israel. Reformists want diplomatic de-escalation to avoid economic catastrophe. The Revolutionary Guard wants expanded proxy operations. Supreme Leader Khamenei wants results without direct confrontation. Pezeshkian is balancing these demands while managing a collapsing economy and widespread public discontent. And when leaders in that position make sudden moves, they're not doing it from strength. They're doing it from pressure. They're doing it from vulnerability. The Trump transition team's statement, now circulated to allied governments, was designed to signal that Washington is not willing to tolerate Iranian escalation during the transition period. Senior advisors said plainly that Iran's military positioning was inconsistent with regional stability and American security interests. That is diplomatic language for try it and face consequences beyond anything the Biden administration would have authorized. You don't usually hear that tone from incoming administrations unless something serious is at stake. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee in a classified, forceful briefing Friday night. He said, "Iran has made threats it cannot fulfill and promises it cannot keep." He said, "Our enemies mistake patience for weakness and restraint for hesitation." And he said, "Israel will act preemptively, decisively, and without apology to protect our citizens from those who promise our destruction." These are not rhetorical flourishes. These are statements from a military power that understands just how high the stakes have become. Here's what makes the situation even more concerning. Iran's latest warning wasn't isolated. Along with Pezeshkian's televised address, Hezbollah leadership also issued statements threatening unprecedented retaliation. Iranian-backed militias in Iraq increased drone operations targeting U.S. bases. Houthi forces in Yemen escalated missile attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea. All of this happened within the same 72-hour period. When Iran moves multiple proxy pieces at once, it means something larger is underway. Regional security analysts are now considering several possibilities. One is that Iran is preparing a coordinated multi-front assault using Hezbollah, Iraqi militias, and Houthi forces simultaneously. Another is that Iran is attempting to establish new deterrence thresholds before Trump implements more aggressive policies. A third possibility, the one worrying officials the most, is that Iran is attempting to force a crisis that would constrain Trump's options before he even takes office. But today, Israel took that card off the table. They didn't wait for diplomatic negotiations. They didn't wait for American permission. They didn't wait for Iran to complete preparations. They struck preemptively. What we're watching now is a test of credibility. Iran wants to see whether Trump will restrain Israel or empower them. Israel wants to show they operate independently regardless of American political transitions. The Biden administration wants to prevent major escalation during their final weeks, and Trump's team wants to prevent Iran from establishing facts on the ground before January 20th. Tonight, we've heard from Pentagon officials who are now monitoring Iranian communications for signs of retaliation. They say Iranian military commanders are assessing damage and recalculating options. They say Hezbollah forces along the Lebanese border have been placed on elevated alert status. And they say Iran's decision to issue public warnings through Pezeshkian is likely part of a broader psychological strategy intended to divide Western support for Israel. But Israel is not backing down. In fact, Israel is expanding intelligence collection operations. Their response today, swift, precise, and devastating, sent a message to Tehran that threats will be met with preemptive action, and it sent a message to Washington that Israel expects full support regardless of who occupies the White House. As the weekend unfolds, we expect more details to emerge about what exactly Iran hoped to achieve. But what we do know is that Israel's preemptive strikes were timely. They degraded Iranian capabilities before they became operational. They demonstrated Israel's intelligence superiority, and they showed Tehran that threats produce consequences, not concessions. What happens next will depend on what Iran does in the next 48 to 72 hours. If they absorb these losses and recalibrate, this moment will be remembered as successful deterrence. If they choose escalation, both Israel and the incoming Trump administration have already shown they are positioned to respond. They have shown they are ready to respond. And tonight, for the first time in months, Tehran appears to be calculating. Iranian state media is quiet, too quiet. And when Tehran is quiet, it means they are reassessing. It means they are choosing their next move carefully. Because tonight, Iran learned something they have learned many times. Threats against Israel produce military responses, not diplomatic retreats. Washington's support for Israel transcends administration changes. And Israel will not wait for threats to materialize before acting. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear. Pezeshkian's warning did not weaken Israel's resolve. Trump's team is coordinating closely with Israeli defense planners. And Iran now faces a choice between escalation they cannot win or de-escalation that preserves what's left of their regional infrastructure. And we will be here watching every detail as the next phase unfolds.